Hey folks, welcome back to another edition of My Car Guru. This is Lenny Lawson, not an artificial intelligence robot. The reason I say that, I just got done reading an article in Automotive News. It's an industry publication. Doesn't that sound exciting? Yes, I just live, breathe, walk, talk cars and the car industry. But I was a little bit disappointed in this article. It's about robots. It's about what's coming. And here's the plan. This isn't my plan. This is basically manufacturing. This is what's going to happen. They're working towards a future of something they call the dark factory. Sounds wicked, doesn't it? This is a factory with no people in it. Just an assembly line. It could have all kinds of parts and everything that you would normally have in an auto assembly plant. There's just no people. Now, they have robots in automotive assembly plants now, but they just look like big arms, that swing around like a crane arm or something. You've seen videos of them. They do a lot of welding and sealing. They put in windshields and all kinds of repetitive type stuff. But when it comes to installing an instrument panel, to hooking up wires on an engine, connecting all of the different wiring harnesses together, installing a dashboard, installing seats, just plugging in stuff and screwing on things. They still need us humans for that, but not for long, because Mr. Musk and several other companies are creating these robots, and they're for real. And once they have the cost in line, people will be eliminated. It's going to happen. So what are they going to do? Well, I was just thinking about Henry Ford many years ago, back when he was building Model T Fords up at the Rouge River plant in Dearborn, Michigan. He made the brilliant decision one day. He said, it's weird. I've got all these employees working for me, and none of them can afford to buy the cars that they're producing. So I need to fix that. So he decided to increase their pay. You know what he increased their pay to? $5 a day. And when he did that, it rocked the world, because that was just an incredible pay increase for the average assembly line worker. And all of a sudden it made it possible for all of the employees that worked for the Ford Motor Company, and there were a bunch of them back then because everything was done by humans. And it enabled all of them. Now, some made more than $5 a day, but the minimum wage was $5 a day. And they were now able to buy a Ford vehicle, Model T. Well, as this progressed, you go a few more years, and then all of a sudden the people in the South heard about it. And there was this mass migration of people of all races moving towards Michigan and working in these auto assembly plants. It wasn't just Michigan, though. It was Illinois and Ohio and different places up in the great white north. And so they all moved up there to get these higher paying jobs. And they stayed. And they unionized, because the $5 wage and whatever it increased to just wasn't enough over time. And working conditions were tough, and, they had long working hours and stuff. So they came up with this idea of developing a labor union. And it was a brutal fight. There was a brutal fight at that same Rouge River plant many years ago. And I think they called it Bloody Tuesday or something like that. It even has a name. But they had this big fight between union organizers and the thugs that Henry Ford had hired. He had gone from being a champion of the worker to a pariah. And it took a few years to do that, but they finally were able to work out some things, and unions took a foothold. And prices went up, and wages went up even more. Working conditions improved. There's a lot of good things that unions were able to accomplish. But then in the 70s and in the 80s, there were a lot of foreign car companies like Honda. They opened a plant in Marysville, Ohio. Not Maryville, like they say it down here. It has an S in it. Maryville is outside of Knoxville in Blount County, and it doesn't have that extra S in it. But this is Marysville, and it's outside of Columbus. And they built a motorcycle plant there, Honda did. And then they said, well, heck, we can build motorcycles here. Let's build cars. And so they did it. But they weren't the first foreign maker to start building vehicles in the United States. The first one of any size was Volkswagen. That's right. They opened a plant in Westmoreland, Pennsylvania. I believe that's the name of it. And it was not very successful. They tried to instill the same type of dedication into a lot of these unemployed American workers that took the jobs that the German workforce had. Totally different paradigm there. And so quality suffered. You remember the name of the car that they were building up there in Westmoreland? That's right, the Volkswagen Rabbit. What do they call that car now? Well, it's not made in America. It's made in Germany, and they call it the Golf, G-O-L-F. They went from a Rabbit to Golf. But you know, that's the way Volkswagen is. They come up with some weird names like Scirocco and Tiguan. But Jetta was a pretty good name and a pretty good car. And really, the Golf is a really good car, too. But, you know, this tells you a little bit about the evolution of the American auto industry. Now they've all moved south. Well, not all of them, just most of them. You got Nissan. You know, they landed in Smyrna, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, and they even moved their headquarters, their North American headquarters, from California to Nashville. They thought that was kind of locating themselves in the Bible Belt, and it worked really well for a lot of years. They're struggling a little bit now, but they'll right the ship. Everybody's struggling, especially with all these new tariffs and stuff. Hey, Abby. Abby just is walking in here right now. Abby, what was that other Volkswagen that you used to drive? Passat, yeah. I like Jetta a whole lot better than Passat. She just happened by. Okay, see you, Abby. You're welcome. See you. So this is a live action show at Gateway Ford in Greenville, Tennessee. And I'm going to take my first break. I'll be back in just 1 minute. So we had an incident at our car dealership the other day. And anytime we have a customer that is not happy, my philosophy, I think I've made it very clear on this program, and I wish it was the philosophy of every dealership across this great land, but it's not, is to preserve the relationship. And sometimes my younger people, I'm old, I understand it, and I used to be a hothead in my younger days, but I matured. And the goal is to preserve the relationship. Now, if somebody is upset because of a repair, or, you know, if there's a transaction they didn't understand or felt they were lied to for some reason, which I hope would never happen here. But if it happened and they came into the dealership and they were throwing things or being, you know, threatening in some way, I have called the police before. And, you know, we took care of that situation. And I have banned people. I said, don't ever come back. You know, I'll give you this bill, but here's your paid copy, but don't ever darken my door again. You know, some people with their behavior deserve that. Would you agree? Have you ever seen that in a store, in a retail store, where somebody just absolutely goes off? You know, to me, there is never an excuse for that. But what I try to make clear to my people, and I had to make clear to my daughter, Abby, because she was struggling with a particular situation. I'll tell you about it here in a second. I said, you always have to side with the customer. You cannot ever side with the dealership. You have to take the role almost like this. Well, Mr. Customer, I'm really sorry that this happened, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you're happy because we want to continue our relationship. Now, at that point, they may say, I'll never do business with you again anyway. And that's fine. I mean, it's not fine. But I still, when they go home and they're talking to their neighbors, you know, they may say, well, the neighbor may say, I'm thinking about going to buy a new Ford. So, well, don't go buy it at Gateway. You know, I don't want them saying that. What I'd prefer they say is, well, you know, I had a situation there, but, you know, they stepped up and they made it right. So Yeah, I'd give Gateway another shot. So here was the situation. We had this customer that had a 2014 model vehicle, and I think it was a van, and he had taken it to an independent repair shop. It was hard to start, and he was trying to start it so much, would crank and crank and crank, he'd run his battery completely dead, and then he'd have to jump it off, and then he would, drive it some more, and it would hesitate and miss and die, and so he took it to an independent shop. And the guy at the independent shop said, well, this is a little bit over our heads because it probably has something to do with the computer system, and we don't have the tools here to be able to do a full diagnostic on the fuel pump and the computer system. So you need to take it to a Ford store. And he did. He brought it to us. So we have a diagnostic charge. We charge 1 hour of labor to figure out what's going on. But this was a lot more intensive than that, so the labor increased some while we were trying to figure out what's going on with this vehicle. He came in saying, I want you to replace my fuel pump. Well, sometimes that will correct a problem. But the first thing that we do at the dealership is, and I hate this, but this is the way it is, we hook up a computer to his computer, his onboard computer called the PCM. That's an acronym, I know. But that's the onboard computer that basically dictates to the emission and fuel system what to do, gives it instructions. So we hooked up to his communication port and invaded his PCM to see what was going on. And it had all kinds of codes in it, so it was not communicating with the fuel pump. And so there was a problem with the PCM. Could be a problem with the fuel pump as well. So we worked on the fuel pump as well, and it was bad. It's an in-tank unit. So we replaced the fuel pump and the PCM. Here's the problem. PCM's $800. He came in, he said, I just wanted a fuel pump. Yeah, well, sir, the fuel pump is only part of the problem. We could put a fuel pump in it, but that fuel pump will get burned up if the PCM is sending it the wrong information. They have to work together. This is the modern car for you. It's why there will never be a currently sold modern car that will be a collector car in 30 years. It's because nobody will retain the equipment or the programming or all the other stuff that you have to do to fix the things. It's not like having a 66 Ford Mustang. It's got a carburetor on it. There's not a printed circuit anywhere. So that's why I think the collector cars that are collector cars today are going to be even more valuable when everybody's driving around in electric cars. And, there's just nothing worth collecting at that time period or from this time period. So anyway, here you have a customer who is anticipating, a $600-800 bill, and, we're approaching $3,000. That would shock me. I'd be very upset. And would you question whether what they're doing, whether what Gateway, my dealership, is doing is correct? If all the knowledge that you had was that somebody said you might need a fuel pump, and with your limited mechanical knowledge, you think, well, I think it's the fuel pump because I don't hear it. I don't hear it running when I hit the ignition key. Well, that's what this customer thought, and now he is irate. But, I listened to him talk, and as long as you are calm on the phone, you don't want to be like a comatose person. You want to be able to communicate and be nice, but you never get defensive. And that's a problem that I have with some of my young employees. Occasionally, when they get pushed so far, they go into the defensive mode. And that's understandable, isn't it? That's a human response. You don't really like to be called, he didn't call her a liar. He just said she was being untruthful, or he didn't believe her. I think that was it. And that set off some alarm bells. So what you have to do in that kind of a situation, and what I coach my team to do, is just agree with the customer. Apologize. Say, Mr. Customer, I'm sorry. I agree that this is a very unusual situation. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that this problem is solved. And when it's all said and done, I promise you, it'll be fair and you will agree that we're being fair. Fair enough. I might leave that off. But still, you understand where I'm coming from? So let's say you have your vehicle in the shop. You take it to a dealership. And that's where I recommend you take them, especially if they have a serious computer problem, check engine lights, any type of fuel delivery thing, exhaust. There's all kinds of things that can set off a check engine light, but you need to take it back to the dealer that sells that particular make and model of car. Now, are they perfect? No, they're all different. I mean, if you go to a Hyundai dealership or a Honda dealership, Chevrolet, Ford, all of the service departments are different, and they have different skill sets as far as their technicians are concerned in the dealership. You would hope that all of them would be able to do the same level of work, but that's just not the case. We've got a Ford dealer that's not too far from us that sends us all of his transmission work because he doesn't have a technician in his dealership that's certified to work on Ford transmissions. So he sends them to us. Now, what if you were his customer and you brought it in because your F-150 transmission didn't seem like it was working right? This is what happened. This truck had 785 miles on it, and it was shifting funny, and it would actually sometimes when you put your foot on the gas, it wouldn't go, and it was a very low mileage truck. Took it into the dealership. They gave him a loaner car, and they called us, and they said, "Can we bring it to you?" I think they drove it to us. It made it up here. Now, should they have told that customer that they weren't going to be working on the vehicle, that they had to send it to Greenville? Well, they should have, but they didn't, and that caused a little bit of a problem. But here we are working. I was talking to the technician that was working on it, and he had the transmission flipped over, had the pan off of it, and I was just looking at it. I said, where do you go first for something like that? And he takes me over to his computer, his laptop, and shows me the diagnostic template that he uses to go through this transmission. I said, that is so cool. It's like a matrix or a spreadsheet that showed if it does this, you do this. If it does this, you do this. And, you just don't realize how talented and sophisticated these people have to be able to do the kind of repairs that they have to do. And a lot of these guys are just high school graduates that ended up either going to a technical school or they never went to a technical school. They just went to the school of hard knocks and learned it the hard way. And in my technician's case, he went to a technical school many years ago, but that just kind of gave him his start. All of his training took place in the dealership, and not just mine, but most of it was in mine, because we would send him to all these training schools. We spend approximately $12,000 to $15,000 a year per technician on training, just to keep their skills where they need to be, so that we have that guy that can work on a transmission, and we don't have to send the vehicle to another dealership. It is a complicated business, and not only do you have to manage the technical side of it, but you have to be pretty good at managing the front end, where the interaction is with the customer. You can't explain some of these technicalities to some people because it just kind of goes over their head. It's just like when I try to give my wife directions. I can tell after like the second turn, her eyes just kind of glaze over. And I know the input channel has been disconnected. So I ended up writing it down, or I just plug it into her phone, and she said, "Oh, okay, I can do that." Some people just aren't good with directions. And the truth of the matter is, some people aren't good at being technicians. We had one of those. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Okay, I am back. Yeah, several years ago, we had a guy that came from another dealership, another area. I think he was even out of state, came to Tennessee, bounced around a couple times at a couple dealerships, but he had all of the Ford certifications. He was a master Ford technician. And I'm not sure he could replace a battery. It was that bad. I mean, he just did not have the skills to match his knowledge. And some people, that's just the way some people are. But, one of the things I learned from reading this latest edition of Automotive News is how important it's going to be for folks to get technical training and to not have a job that can be replaced by artificial intelligence. The factory workers at General Motors plant or at a Ford plant, they may well be replaced by robots. And, if you're if you're in journalism or if you're in the legal field, if you do a lot of writing, maybe even if you're a doctor. I heard that if you are a cardiologist and basically what you do is read echocardiograms and all the other things they do, they don't need you anymore because AI can do it faster and more accurately. And I think the medical field is going to be highly affected by that. So we're going to have to find jobs for folks that they can do that cannot be replaced by AI or a robot. Whoever thunk it? I think probably one of the best fields that you could go into would be a stand-up comedian, because that's one thing that I don't think a robot or artificial intelligence is going to be able to do. See? There's one idea. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru. If you need me, send me a text or call 423-552-2020 or send me an email to lennylawson2020@gmail.com, and I'll see you on the next edition of My Car Guru.